He built towers that touched the sky. His name was etched into the skyline of 3 continents. Forbes called him a visionary. Bloomberg called him relentless. But on the night everything fell apart, Dominic Ashford stood alone in his London penthouse, rain hammering against floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at a single text message on his phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. 5 words that gutted him more than any failed deal, any hostile takeover, any betrayal in the boardroom ever had. The message read, "I was never meant for your world." He read it once, then again, then a third time, as though repetition might somehow change the letters, rearrange them into something softer, something he could survive. But the words stayed exactly as they were. Final, devastating, true. He set the phone face down on the counter. His reflection stared back at him from the rain-streaked glass. Tailored shirt, expensive watch, a jaw clenched so tight it ached. The man the world admired, the man no one truly knew. Somewhere across the globe, the only woman who had ever seen through every wall he had ever built was walking away. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Dominic Ashford had absolutely no blueprint for what to do next. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who made you feel more alive in 5 minutes than you had felt in 5 years? Someone who looked at you, not at your title, not at your net worth, not at the performance you put on for the world, but at you, the real you, the one you buried so deep you almost forgot that version existed. What would you do if you found that person? And what would you do if you lost them? This is the story of a man who had everything the world says you should want: money, power, influence, respect, and a woman who had everything the world tends to overlook: purpose, depth, vision, and soul. When their paths collided at a wedding neither of them wanted to attend, something extraordinary began. But what happened next? Well, nobody saw it coming. Not him, not her, and certainly not the forces that tried to tear them apart. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because the way it unfolds will change how you think about love, about worth, and about what it truly means to be seen by another human being. If you believe that love can find you when you least expect it, drop a heart in the comments right now. And make sure you are subscribed to Sweet Love Journey so you do not miss a single moment of what happens next. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The Sardinian coastline burned amber and violet beneath the sinking Mediterranean sun. Its light caught the limestone walls of a centuries-old villa perched above the sea like a painting that refused to age. Olive trees lined the gravel paths. Jasmine climbed the stone archways. Somewhere below the terraced gardens, the Tyrrhenian Sea whispered against ancient rocks, as if the island itself were exhaling after a long, warm day. It was the kind of setting that demanded reverence, the kind of beauty that made people pause mid-sentence and just breathe. Hundreds of white chairs had been arranged beneath a canopy of wisteria. Fairy lights were strung across white tents, like scattered stars brought down to earth. Imported peonies in ivory and blush lined every table. A live string quartet played softly from a corner draped in flowing silk. This was the wedding of Isla Mercer, and it was nothing short of spectacular. But Dominic Ashford barely noticed any of it. He stood at the edge of the terrace, a glass of Barolo untouched in his hand, his charcoal linen suit fitting him like armor he had forgotten how to take off. At 35, Dominic carried the kind of presence that drew silence when he entered a room, not because people feared him, though some certainly did, but because he moved through the world with the unmistakable gravity of a man who had bent life to his will and found it hollow on the other side. Founder of Meridian Group, a sustainable architecture empire valued at over $4 billion, Dominic had designed buildings that redefined city skylines and eco-villages that earned international humanitarian awards. He had shaken hands with heads of state and dined with royalty. His face had been on the cover of every major business publication in the Western world. And yet standing here now, surrounded by laughter and champagne flutes and the warm perfume of 100 flowers, he felt like a ghost at someone else's celebration. 3 years. That is how long it had been since his divorce from Vivienne. 3 years since she had stood in the foyer of their Kensington townhouse, suitcase by her side, mascara tracing 2 thin rivers down her cheeks, and said the words that still echoed through his quietest moments. "You build beautiful things for strangers, Dominic, but you cannot build a life with me." He never argued. He never chased her. He simply watched her walk out and then closed the door, poured himself a whiskey, and went back to his blueprints. Because that is what Dominic Ashford did. He built, he controlled, he endured. He did not break, but he did not heal either. Julian Mercer, his closest friend since their days at Oxford, had practically dragged him to this wedding. Julian was one of the few people on the planet who could get past Dominic's defenses, mostly because he had known him before the money, before the empire, before the walls went up. "Come to Sardinia," Julian had said over the phone 3 weeks earlier. "It is my sister's wedding. You are not hiding in your office. Wear something that does not scream board meeting. And for God's sake, Dominic, try to enjoy yourself." So here he was, trying, failing. The ceremony had been beautiful by all accounts. The bride glowed, the groom wept. The vows were tender enough to crack open even the most stubborn of hearts. But Dominic had watched it all from behind the carefully constructed wall he wore everywhere, an expression that looked like composure but was really just a very polished kind of emptiness. He swirled the wine he had no intention of drinking and scanned the crowd. Socialites in silk, business acquaintances in tailored suits, old money laughter that sounded rehearsed, all part of a world that applauded success but never once asked if the successful were actually happy. And then, just as the golden hour light dipped toward the sea, he saw her. She was not at the center of anything. She stood near the far edge of the garden, half hidden by a cascade of bougainvillea, holding a small sketchbook in one hand and a stub of charcoal in the other. Her skin was a luminous shade of deep bronze, kissed by years of equatorial sun and the kind of warmth that no highlighter could replicate. She wore a dress the color of burnt sienna, simple and elegant, the fabric moving with her like it had been made for this exact evening, this exact light. Her dark hair was gathered loosely at the nape of her neck, a few rebellious strands dancing near her temples as the breeze caught them. She was drawing, something about the coastline maybe, or perhaps the silhouette of the villa against the dying sky. Whatever it was, she was entirely absorbed, her brow furrowed slightly in concentration. Her lips were parted, as if she were having a silent conversation with the page. She was not performing for anyone. She was not posing for photographs. She was not scanning the crowd for someone important to impress. She was simply, utterly, unapologetically herself. And something about that stillness, that quiet authenticity in a garden full of performance, reached into the hollow place inside Dominic's chest and pulled, not gently, not politely, but with the sudden, disorienting force of a man who has been holding his breath for years and finally remembers he needs air. He set down his wine. He did not plan what he would say. In business, every word was calculated. Every pause was strategic. Every silence was a weapon. But this was not business. This was instinct, raw and unrehearsed, guiding his feet across the gravel path before his mind could raise an objection. She looked up when his shadow crossed her page. Her eyes were striking, deep brown with flecks of gold, like sunlight trapped in amber. They held no recognition, no flicker of the usual awe people wore when they realized who he was. Just curiosity, clean and undiluted, the kind you cannot fake. "You are blocking my light," she said. Dominic blinked, and then, for the first time in months, he laughed. A real laugh, rough-edged and surprised, drawn out of him like a splinter from beneath the skin. "I am sorry," he said, stepping to the side. "I just noticed you were not inside with everyone else." She tilted her head, the ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "I could say the same about you. Fair point." He gestured toward the sketchbook. "May I?" She hesitated, just for a moment, a brief flicker of protectiveness, the kind artists carry when someone asks to see unfinished work. Then she turned it toward him. It was not the coastline she had been drawing. It was the bride and groom mid-dance, captured in sweeping strokes of charcoal that somehow held more emotion than any photograph could. She had caught the movement, the joy, the way the bride's hand rested on the groom's chest like she was feeling his heartbeat through the fabric. "This is extraordinary," Dominic said quietly. "It is unfinished," she replied, pulling the sketchbook back gently. "Everything good is, for a while." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not fire, not yet, but the quiet crackle of recognition. Two people standing on the outer rim of a world that celebrated connection, each nursing their own private solitude, suddenly realizing they might not be as alone as they thought. "I am Dominic," he said. "Nadia," she replied. Nadia Okafor. Julian appeared beside them an hour later, grinning in a way that suggested the seating chart for dinner had not been random. Nadia is one of Isla's closest friends from Johannesburg, Julian explained, handing Dominic a fresh glass. She is a photojournalist and artist, travels the world documenting vanishing cultures and forgotten places. Dominic raised an eyebrow. That sounds nothing like interior seating arrangements. Julian laughed. Which is probably why you will like her. He was right. They were placed directly across from each other at the long, candle-lit dinner table. And from the first course to the last, the conversation between them moved like a current, effortless and deep, weaving between stories and silences in a rhythm that felt less like a first meeting and more like a reunion. Nadia told him about growing up in Johannesburg. She had been raised by her grandmother after losing both parents young, a woman of iron will and infinite tenderness who taught her that art was not decoration. Art was testimony. It was evidence that a life had been lived, that a voice had existed, that someone had stood in a particular place at a particular time and felt something worth remembering. She spoke about her work in remote villages across Mozambique and Madagascar, about months spent listening to oral traditions that were vanishing faster than anyone cared to acknowledge. She photographed them, yes, but she also drew them. Because, as she explained with a quiet intensity that made the candle flames seem to lean toward her, a camera captures moments, but a hand captures meaning. Dominic leaned forward, his food growing cold, completely captivated, not by the glamour of her stories, but by the way she inhabited them. She did not perform. She did not inflate. She simply told the truth with such vividness that the dining table disappeared, and he could see the red earth roads, smell the salt air of the Indian Ocean, hear the voices of the women she described. You sound like someone who has found her purpose, he said. Nadia paused, candlelight flickering across her face. Purpose found me, she said softly. I just stopped running from it. He was quiet, and then, before he could catch himself, the words escaped. I am still running. She did not push. She did not pry. She simply looked at him with the same patient, steady attention she gave her subjects, as though he, too, was worth documenting. And so, for the first time in years, Dominic told his real story, not the polished press version, not the rags-to-riches narrative that made for compelling magazine profiles, the real one. He told her about growing up working class in Manchester, 3 brothers crammed into one bedroom in a council flat that smelled of damp and cooking oil. He told her about the scholarship to Oxford that felt less like a golden ticket and more like a warning that he would never truly belong anywhere. He told her about the sleepless years building Meridian Group from nothing, about the loneliness that lived inside ambition like a parasite, about the marriage that crumbled because he could not let anyone pass the walls he had built to survive. The media painted me as a genius, he said, cold and unstoppable. But here is the truth. I am not cold. I am terrified. I have been terrified for so long that I forgot there was another way to be. Nadia's eyes glistened. She did not reach for him. She did not offer platitudes. She simply said, You see too clearly to be as lost as you think you are. He smiled faintly. You see too clearly yourself. Occupational hazard, she whispered. After dinner, they found each other again at the stone balustrade overlooking the moonlit sea. The conversation deepened. They talked about fear and purpose, and the difference between being admired and being known. They walked the cliffside path behind the villa for nearly 2 hours, trading stories like travelers exchanging coins from distant lands. She told him about being stranded in a fishing village in the Comoros Islands for 3 weeks during monsoon season, surviving on cassava, and the extraordinary hospitality of strangers who had almost nothing and gave everything. He told her about Vivian, about the divorce papers that arrived while he was in a meeting about a building that would win him an award, about the emptiness that followed, the kind that success could not fill because success was the thing that had created it in the first place. When they finally stopped walking, the moon hung full and heavy over the water, painting the world in silver. The villa was quiet now, the party winding down behind them. Good night, Nadia, he said at the entrance to the guest quarters, his voice rougher than he intended. She looked up at him. A smile, small and luminous, crossed her face. Good night, architect. He lay awake for hours that night, staring at the ceiling of the guest room. Something tectonic had shifted inside him. Not a crack, not a tremor. A full rearrangement of the ground beneath his feet. He did not know what to call it yet. but he knew it had her name on it. The morning after was quieter. The villa had emptied of most guests. Only a few close friends and family lingered for the Sunday brunch. Dominic had a helicopter scheduled for noon. His calendar was already filling up with meetings, conference calls, the usual machinery of empire, but he was not ready to leave. He found Nadia in the courtyard, reading beneath a lemon tree, dappled sunlight falling across her shoulders. She looked up as his shadow fell across the page. "Should you not be somewhere important?" she asked. He met her gaze. "I am somewhere important." She blushed. A woman who had stared down monsoons and war zones and vanishing traditions, undone by a single sentence. He sat across from her and they shared breakfast on the terrace. Strong espresso, fresh figs, warm bread with olive oil. The conversation was lighter now, textured with laughter and the easy comfort of two people who had, in the span of one extraordinary night, crossed a threshold neither of them had expected to find. But when the silence settled between bites, reality crept in like a tide. "I am going back to Nairobi next week," she said, staring into her cup. "I have been based there for the past year, working on a documentary about women-led conservation efforts along the East African coast. And I will be in London," he replied. "So what is this?" she asked. "What do you want it to be?" She met his gaze and held it. "Honest, whatever it is, I need it to be honest." "Then honestly," he said, leaning forward, his voice low and certain, "I have not felt this awake in years, and I am terrified of going back to sleep." Her breath trembled. "I do not fit into your world, Dominic. I live out of a suitcase. I spend months in places with no running water. I do not do galas and champagne." "Good," he said. "I have had enough of both. I am serious. So am I." She studied him the way she studied everything, looking for the truth beneath the surface. He let her. He had nothing to hide. Not anymore. "One step at a time," she finally said. "That is all I can promise. That is all I am asking. If this story is already pulling at your heartstrings, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who believes in love against all odds. Trust me, you are going to want to see what happens next." The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. They spoke daily, sometimes through long voice notes recorded from opposite hemispheres, her voice crackling slightly over the connection from a Kenyan fishing village, his baritone humming through the walls of a glass tower in Canary Wharf. She sent him photographs of sunsets over the Indian Ocean, skies painted in colors that no architect could replicate. He sent her something he had never shown anyone before, his private sketchbook, filled with designs of buildings he had drawn not for clients or contracts, but purely for the joy of imagining something beautiful. "You should build this one," she told him one night over video call, pointing to a sketch of a coastal library made of reclaimed wood and glass. "For yourself." "Maybe I will," he said, "if you help me choose the view." Their calls stretched past midnight. Sometimes they talked for hours, layering confession over confession like paint on canvas. Other times they simply sat in silence, her editing photographs at her desk, him reviewing blueprints at his, the quiet hum of each other's breathing the only soundtrack they needed. It was intimacy without proximity, connection without performance, and it changed him. His staff noticed. Meetings were rescheduled. Conferences were pushed back. The word personal began appearing on his calendar for the first time in the 4 years his assistant had worked for him. Julian visited the London office one afternoon and stopped in the doorway, staring at Dominic, who was smiling at his phone. "You are different," Julian said. Dominic looked up. "Am the first, softer, happier." Julian paused. "She is good for you." Dominic did not deny it. He simply said, "She is good, period." But beneath the warmth, an ache was growing. Screens and voice notes and long-distance good nights were not enough. He needed to be near her, not in theory, not through pixels, in person. So, 6 weeks after Sardinia, Dominic flew to Nairobi. No motorcade, no entourage, no 5-star itinerary, just a single duffel bag, a pair of boots he had bought specifically for unpaved roads, and a heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape the cage he had kept it in for years. Nadia met him at the airport in a dusty Land Cruiser, laughing at the look on his face when the heat hit him. "Welcome to my world," she said, and for the first time in his life, Dominic felt like he had truly arrived somewhere. She took him to the coastal village where she had been working for months, a small community of women who patrolled the mangrove forests to protect endangered marine life. He watched her work. He watched her kneel in the sand beside fisherwomen, not as a journalist extracting stories, but as a listener absorbing them. He watched her hands move across her sketchbook, translating spoken memory into visual testimony. He watched her cry quietly when one of the village elders placed a weathered hand on her shoulder and said, "You do not just take our picture, you carry our voice." That night, they sat across from each other on a woven mat in a small guest house overlooking the water. A single lantern burned between them. The sound of the ocean filled the room. "Why did you really come?" Nadia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I wanted to see the world the way you see it. And," he paused, "and it is more beautiful than anything I have ever built." The silence between them deepened, not empty silence, full silence, the kind that holds everything two people are afraid to say out loud. Then Nadia spoke. I am falling in love with you." Dominic reached across the mat and took her hand, lifted it slowly to his lips. "I fell a long time ago," he said against her skin. "I was just waiting for you to catch up." She laughed, the sound thick with tears, and then she kissed him, not desperately, not with cinematic urgency, but slowly, certainly, with the quiet conviction of a woman who had decided, at last, to stop being afraid. Now I need to tell you what happened next, because this is where the story takes a turn that neither of them saw coming. Nadia visited London, and for the first few days, everything was magic. Dominic showed her the art gallery he secretly owned. She transformed his sterile penthouse with textiles from West Africa and pottery from Morocco. They cooked badly together and laughed about it. They walked through Soho in the rain and kissed on a bridge over the Thames at midnight. But then came the fundraiser. Dominic hosted a black tie event for Meridian Group's top investors. He wanted Nadia beside him. She agreed, though she told him with a quiet firmness that she was not there to be displayed. She was there because she wanted to be. The evening started well enough. Crystal chandeliers, soft chamber music, immaculate canapes on silver trays. But as the night wore on, the undercurrents revealed themselves. A senior board member's wife approached Nadia during cocktails, her smile as tight as her facelift. "And what exactly is it you do, dear?" the woman asked, tilting her champagne flute as though Nadia were a curiosity she was inspecting from a safe distance. Nadia held her gaze. "I make the invisible visible." The woman blinked, clearly unsure whether she had been complimented or dismantled. She excused herself quickly, but there were others. Polite smiles that did not reach the eyes. Subtle once-overs. The quiet, corrosive condescension of people who measured worth in net worth and found everyone else lacking. Nadia held her head high through all of it. She smiled. She was gracious. But Dominic saw the tension in her shoulders. He saw the way her fingers tightened around her glass. Later, in the car, the composure cracked. "They think I am temporary," she said, staring out the window at the rain-slicked streets. "A novelty. Something exotic you will grow bored of." Dominic's jaw tightened. "They are irrelevant. They matter to your business. They do not matter more than you do." She turned to face him. "Do you really mean that?" He held her gaze. "If being with you costs me the approval of every crusty billionaire in that room, I would consider it a bargain." She almost smiled. Almost. But the cracks had already begun to form, and what came next blew them wide open. 3 days later, the photographs appeared. Paparazzi shots from the fundraiser. Dominic and Nadia arriving together, his hand on the small of her back, her dress catching the light. The headlines were immediate and merciless. Billionaire architect's mystery woman. Who is she? Dominic Ashford's new flame or latest charity project. The comment sections were worse, venomous, cruel, dripping with the kind of casual racism and classism that hides behind anonymous profile pictures. She is after his money. She does not belong in his world. Another mogul slumming it. Give it 3 months. Nadia had been in war zones. She had documented human suffering on scales most people cannot fathom. She had stared into the eyes of grief and held steady. But this was different. This was personal, intimate, violating. They were not attacking her work. They were attacking her existence. They were questioning whether she had the right to be loved by a man like Dominic, as though love required membership to a club she had never applied to join. She withdrew. Her calls became shorter. Her voice notes, once warm and meandering, became clipped and efficient. She stopped sending photographs. Dominic noticed. Of course he noticed. But every time he reached for her, she pulled back a little further. And then Vivian resurfaced. His ex-wife sent a message, elegant, measured, and laced with just enough regret to be dangerous. She had seen the articles. She wanted to meet, to talk, to tell him she had made a mistake. Dominic did not respond, but Nadia found out, not from him, from a mutual acquaintance who mentioned it casually, not realizing the grenade she was lobbing into an already fragile situation. Nadia did not scream. She did not accuse. That would have been easier. Instead, she sat across from him on the sofa in his penthouse, hands folded in her lap, and said the words that cut deeper than any shout. Maybe she was right for your world, and I was just a beautiful detour. Dominic leaned forward. That is not true. Is it not? Nadia asked quietly. She comes from your world. She understands the galas and the headlines and the expectations. I come from red earth roads and fishing villages. I carry a sketchbook instead of a designer clutch. I do not know which fork to use at your investor dinners, and I do not care to learn. I never asked you to be anyone other than who you are, and I never asked you to save me. But that is what this feels like, Dominic. Like I am a project, something broken you are trying to repair. He flinched. You know that is not what this is. Do I? She whispered. Do I really? The argument did not end with slammed doors. It ended with something far worse. Silence. 2 weeks later, Nadia received a phone call that changed everything. A prestigious international foundation was offering her a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the chance to lead a year-long documentary project across Southeast Asia, fully funded, with complete creative freedom. It was the kind of offer that could define a career, the kind of offer she had dreamed about since she was a girl, sketching in her grandmother's kitchen. It would also mean leaving completely. No more flights between cities, no more stolen weekends, a clean, total, necessary break. She did not tell Dominic immediately. She sat with it for days, turning it over in her mind like a stone in her palm. Her grandmother's voice echoed through the silence. Never let love make you small, child. Never shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's frame. When she finally called him, the conversation was the most painful either of them had ever endured. I have been offered something, she said, something I cannot walk away from. Then do not walk away from it, he replied carefully. It means leaving for a year, maybe longer. Silence. Is this about the job? He asked. Or is this about running away? The words hit her like a slap. Her voice turned to steel. Do not you dare reduce my career to running away. That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Dominic? Because from where I am standing, it feels like you want me to choose between my purpose and your comfort, and that is not a choice I will ever make. He opened his mouth, closed it. The distance between them, once bridged by voice notes and midnight calls and the stubborn insistence that love could survive geography, yawned open like a wound. Nadia hung up. That night, she sent the text, the one that would haunt him for months, the one we started this story with. Do not call me. Do not look for me. I was never meant for your world. And then she vanished. We have reached the moment where everything hangs in the balance. Before we go any further, if this story has you on the edge of your seat, I want you to comment the words "hold on" below and tell me, would you fight for a love like this or would you let it go? If you have not subscribed yet, now is the time, because what happens next, trust me, you do not want to miss it. The weeks that followed were the darkest of Dominic's life. He threw himself into work with a ferocity that alarmed even his most hardened colleagues. 18-hour days, back-to-back meetings, a relentless, grinding pace designed to drown out the silence that had replaced her voice in his life. His penthouse, once warmed by the textiles and photographs she had brought into it, now felt like a mausoleum. Every color she had added reminded him of her absence. Julian came by one evening and found Dominic at his desk, unshaven, a cold cup of coffee at his elbow, staring at a blueprint he had not touched in hours. You are doing it again, Julian said from the doorway. Doing what? hiding behind buildings, burying yourself in concrete and steel because it is easier than feeling something. Dominic did not look up. She left, Julian. Julian crossed the room and sat across from him. She left because you let her believe she had to choose. She is not Vivienne Dom, and you are not the same man you were 3 years ago, so stop acting like it. Dominic finally looked up. His eyes were red. What am I supposed to do? Julian leaned forward. What you always do when something matters. Build. That night, alone in the penthouse, Dominic opened the drawer of his nightstand. Inside was a folded piece of paper Nadia had left behind. A sketch. He unfolded it carefully, and his breath caught. It was a portrait of him, drawn in charcoal on that first night in Sardinia. She had captured him exactly as he was, not the billionaire, not the brand, but the man behind the walls. His eyes in the drawing were not guarded. They were searching, hopeful, afraid. On the back, in her handwriting, were 4 words, the man behind the walls. He pressed the paper to his chest and closed his eyes, and something inside him broke, not dramatically, not with noise or spectacle, quietly, the way truly strong things break, a private, shuddering realization that he had been so afraid of losing her that he had never truly fought for her. The next morning, he did 2 things. First, he responded to Vivienne's message, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with a clarity he had never felt before. I wish you well, Vivienne. Truly. But my heart belongs to someone else. It has for a while. I hope you find what you are looking for. I finally have. Second, he called an emergency meeting with his senior leadership team. When they gathered in the boardroom, expecting news of a merger or an acquisition, Dominic stood at the head of the table and said something none of them anticipated. I am launching a new division, a non-profit arm of Meridian Group, dedicated to building sustainable community spaces in underserved regions. Our first project will be a cultural center on the Kenyan coast, in a village where some of the most important oral histories and artistic traditions on the continent are at risk of being lost forever. We are going to build a space that preserves them, permanently. The room was silent. One board member cleared his throat. And the business case for this? Dominic looked at him. Not everything worth building has a business case. Some things you build because they matter, because someone showed you what matters. He did not tell Nadia. He did not use it as leverage. He did not send it as a grand gesture designed to win her back. He built it because she had taught him what to build, and why. Because for the first time in his career, he was not constructing something to prove his worth to the world. He was constructing something to honor the worth of someone else. The project took months. Dominic personally oversaw the design, reclaimed wood from sustainable sources, solar panels embedded in the roof, a gallery space for local art, a recording studio for oral histories, a library, a garden, every detail intentional, every wall infused with purpose. He did one more thing. He wrote her a letter, not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter on plain paper, the kind she would appreciate precisely because it was not expensive. He wrote, "You taught me that the most important things are not built with steel. They are built with honesty. I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking for anything at all. I am asking you to know that you changed me, not into someone new, but into someone I forgot I could be. Whatever you choose, I will be grateful. For Sardinia, for Nairobi, for the way you looked at me, like I was more than my name. Yours, the architect." He mailed it to her foundation's forwarding address and had no idea if it would ever reach her. 3 months later, Nadia was in a small village in Cambodia, deep in the humid heart of the countryside, documenting the last generation of traditional silk weavers. Her days were long, her work fulfilling, her hands perpetually stained with charcoal and ink. She was doing exactly what she had always wanted to do. And yet, in the quiet moments between interviews and sketches, in the still hours before dawn when the jungle hummed outside her window, she thought of him. She thought of his laugh that first night in Sardinia, rough and surprised, like something long forgotten suddenly remembered. She thought of his hands, large and careful, turning the pages of her sketchbook with a reverence that made her chest ache. She thought of the way he said her name, as if it were the answer to a question he had been asking his entire life. She missed him. God, she missed him. But she had made her choice, and she believed it was the right one. Then the letter arrived. It had been forwarded 3 times, across 2 continents, through the hands of colleagues and postal workers, and a kind old woman at the village general store who held it out with a smile and said, "Someone loves you very much to send a letter this far." Nadia sat on the wooden steps of her guest house and opened it. She read it once, then twice, then a 3rd time, her vision blurring with tears she did not bother to wipe away. He was not chasing her. He was not demanding she return. He was not making promises he could not keep, or gestures designed to overwhelm her defenses. He was simply telling her the truth, that she had changed him, that he was grateful, that he would carry what they had, regardless of what she chose. She pressed the letter to her chest, just as he had pressed her sketch to his. A week later, she received a phone call from the village in Kenya. The women she had worked with, the ones who patrolled the mangrove forests, were calling her, their voices thick with tears and laughter. A building had been constructed, a cultural center, beautiful beyond anything they had imagined, and inside it, their stories were being preserved, their art displayed, their voices recorded and honored and made permanent. She asked who built it. They told her the name, and Nadia sat very still for a very long time. That night, she opened her sketchbook for the first time in weeks. She did not draw a landscape. She did not draw a portrait. She drew 2 hands reaching across a vast distance, fingers almost touching, the space between them filled not with emptiness, but with light. She whispered to herself in the darkness of that Cambodian night, "He did not chase me. He built something. He always builds." But this time, she understood. He had built for the right reasons. 6 months later, the cultural center held its official opening ceremony. The village was alive with celebration. Music from hand-carved instruments filled the salt air. Children ran between the legs of laughing adults. Elders sat in the new gallery space, touching the walls with reverent hands, seeing their own faces in photographs displayed with dignity and care. Dominic was there. He sat quietly in the back row during the speeches, wearing a simple linen shirt and the boots he had bought for his first trip to Kenya. He was not there as a billionaire. He was not there for publicity or recognition. He was there because this building meant more to him than anything he had ever constructed, and he wanted to witness the moment it came alive. The ceremony continued. Speeches were given, songs were sung, and then, as the afternoon light began to soften and the crowd shifted toward the garden for food and dancing, Dominic felt something change in the air, a stillness, a presence, the kind you feel before you see. He looked toward the doorway, and there she was, Nadia, standing in the entrance of the cultural center, camera around her neck, sketchbook under her arm, tears streaming freely down her face. She was thinner, tanned darker by months of Southeast Asian sun. Her hair was longer, wilder, beautiful. She looked like she had walked through fire and come out the other side carrying something precious. She looked like herself. Their eyes met across the room, and the world fell away, just as it had on that Sardinian terrace a lifetime ago. The noise faded. The crowd blurred. There was only her, only him, only the trembling, terrifying, magnificent space between 2 people who had fought their way back to each other not by force, but by faith. She walked toward him, slowly, each step deliberate. He stood, his heart hammering, his hands shaking. The architect who had designed towers that touched the sky, trembling before a woman with a sketchbook. She stopped in front of him. Close enough to touch, she looked around the room, at the gallery walls, at the recording studio, at the garden visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, at the children running through a space that would hold their stories for generations. "You built this," she said. Her voice cracked on the second word. "You inspired it," he replied. She reached out and pressed her palm flat against the wall, felt the reclaimed wood, the texture, the warmth, the care embedded in every grain. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," she whispered. "Second most beautiful," he said, looking only at her. She laughed, a broken, joyful, tear-soaked laugh that sounded like the first morning of a new season, and then she stepped into his arms, not desperately, not dramatically, just simply, completely, irreversibly. "Home," he held her, pressed his lips to the top of her head, breathed her in, and said the only words that mattered. "I see you, all of you, and I am never looking away again." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I am not going anywhere either. He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then, softly, slowly, her lips. And in that kiss lived every mile between them, every sleepless night, every voice note sent into the void, every fear they had chosen to carry together instead of alone, every wall they had broken, every truth they had spoken, every version of themselves they had shed to become the people standing here now, two people who chose honesty over comfort, vulnerability over armor, love over fear. There is something I want to leave you with today. This story was never really about money. It was never about the distance between penthouses and fishing villages, between magazine covers and charcoal sketches. It was about something far simpler and far more rare. It was about being seen, not glanced at, not admired from a distance, not assessed for what you can offer or what you are worth on paper, but truly, deeply, terrifyingly seen. The way Nadia saw Dominic that first night in Sardinia, not as a brand or a balance sheet, but as a man searching for something he had forgotten he needed. The way Dominic saw Nadia, not as someone to rescue or display, but as a woman whose purpose and fire and truth made him want to be better, not different, better. Love does not ask you to shrink. It does not ask you to abandon your purpose, or silence your voice, or squeeze yourself into someone else's frame. Love, the real kind, the kind that survives distance and doubt and the cruelty of a world that loves to tell you what you deserve and what you do not. That kind of love does only one thing. It says, I see you. Stay. And when you find someone brave enough to say that and mean it, and when you are brave enough to stay and mean it, something extraordinary happens. You stop building walls. You start building windows. And through those windows, light gets in, the kind of light that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me, what does it mean to be truly seen by someone? Your answer might just inspire the next story on this channel. Hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a story from Sweet Love Journey. And please share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the right story finds you exactly when you need it most. Until next time, keep believing in love. I will see you in the next one.